Blackwell, President of the Washington County Historical Society. And today, September the 16th, 2001, we're going to be interviewing a man who is a legend in Washington County. He is a retired probate judge and a great storyteller, Judge Tom Turner. And now we will interview him in his sister's home in Sunflower, Alabama.
Hello, my name is Tom White Turner, better known as Tom W. Turner, and I began my history here in this house nearly 75 years ago in the front bedroom across the hall. That's where I was born, and I've never strayed very far from this house, only when I had to in my entire life. I had two sisters, Laura Gray Turner and Sally Turner Stanley. Laura married Robert Atkins first, Vernon Ashcraft second, and Mordecai Arnold third. She died last April, was a year ago, and we've just finished her will case. I married Hattie Parnell, who is by my side, Hattie Parnell Turner, and we have 4 children: Tom Jr., Patricia Gray, David Pugh, and David Anthony. 1 grandchild, Samuel Matthew. That makes up my family, and I was raised on this farm and helped my father with the farming chores and the livestock. The tongue-time orchard that we had, as well as gathering the crops. And I later went to work in Mobile at the shipyard during World War. And after that, I was back in school for a year, high school. They couldn't understand why I had so much trouble in school, but I had to walk so far to school when I started. My mother wouldn't let me go the first year. So I had to come back and wait till the next year. And when that time rolled around, I had lost 10 pounds that year, and they wouldn't let me go that year either. So I didn't get to start school till I was 8 years old.
Where'd you attend school?
Sunflower School. It's about 2 miles down on the Munger Landing Road. But had to walk 2 miles twice a day, and she wouldn't let me do it. But later on, I attended Wakerville and then Leroy High School, and I went back, but before I finished Leroy High School, though, I was drafted in the Army during World War II, and while I was in the Army, the war was over, and I didn't have to stay but a little over 2 years, and I came back home, and Mr. Hugh Garris at Leroy notified me that there was a job available at the Vanity Fair Mill in Jackson, and I was lucky enough to get that job because it paid real well. It paid $4.80 a day before deducts, and with that, me and Hattie started off. We built a house, we bought cars, and a lot of children came along, and I stayed at Vanity Fair for 10 years, like in about a month, I guess it was. And I thought I was pretty popular. Most everybody does, thinks he's popular. He's more concerned with himself than anybody else. But I've always been interested in my county. And I think I had a good insight because I saw it from the inside. I've been in practically every house in the county many, many times. I later on was an insurance salesman, and that carried me from house to house. And I've run many, many times for office and was elected and served 12 years, elected in 1964, and then John Henry Armstrong nudged me out, and I had to get out and go to work. And I got out and got in the oil business and did quite well in that. While I was gone, they changed the method of paying the probate judge. He was no longer on a fee system, and he then was eligible for retirement. So I went back and ran and got elected again, which qualified me for the retirement and the good salary for that last 6 years, and also upped mine and Mama's Social Security based on our last earnings, and I liked that real well. But I made a good bit of money out of the oil business as well as being probate judge after the salary got to be a fair salary. And I'm very grateful for it. I'm very grateful to the people that elected me, because that's what my promotion was. Just my contact with them and their approval of me enabled me to get where I am.
You were probate judge a total of how many years?
A total of 18 years, 3 6-year terms. But I ran several times other than that I didn't get it. I started running in 58, so I've been running for office. Didn't run this last time, but I've run every time up until this last time between 58 and 64.
What was the first time you ran that you were elected? What year?
64. But a lot of good things have happened to the county, and of course I'm not trying to say that I had anything to do with it, but I remember when I was elected, I didn't want anybody to tell me I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know what was going on. So I really made a pretty good rundown of where we were and where our resources were and what we had to do with it. I even checked on Mr. Pearson here, and I found out that his budget to run the school system in this county for that year that I checked was $1.1 million. I'd have to say he did a marvelous job with his $1.1 million. And if you compare that with today, you realize that that wasn't very much to operate on. But I studied what I had to do, and if I should get any credit for anything, it should be that I was persistent. When somebody told me I couldn't do anything, I was determined that I would. And the county, during that time, you give the credit to whoever you want to, but I can tell you that the footwork was mine. This incident that happened this past week, I was counting up how many flights I had made while I was judge. It was over 100 flights. So it is scary, especially at night or whenever, you know. And I was on a couple of planes that had problems. I had one that had a gas line problem, and I had one that had a cover coming off the wing over, and it happened to be right over Cape Canaveral. I was looking down at Cape Canaveral when I came by from Miami. But I've always been interested in the welfare of the county, and I always knew something could be done that could include everybody in growth that was available at that time that they didn't even know anything about. They didn't know how to apply, they didn't know how to do the necessary things to obtain the money. I was elected chairman of the regional government, which is the Regional Planning Commission. I was elected for 2 terms, chairman of that, and I was on the initial board of it when it was organized. And we had a lot of different agencies within that organization to do worthwhile things, as much as to scan the countryside and see who was laying flat of his back on his serving his last days that didn't know how to get any help. We would send that person to them to find out what could be done. And I've had many a compliment over the years for things that I have done in that line. But this thing that happened last week has worried me a great deal, because it so much rhymes with the cycles that people go through with and governments go through with, and it's generally always involves the same thing. It involves family and family freedom and church and church activities as well as monetary gains. And I can't help but notice that everybody who has tried to make a conquest for any portion of this country has always failed, and I certainly hope this movement will fail also. Everybody that tried to come to this country because he was seeking freedom and freedom of religion and freedom of speech and safety for his family seemed to have succeeded. And I couldn't help but catch on to that, and that's been a cycle ever since DeSoto came here, and he was looking for wealth that he had been told was here, which wasn't here, but there was a wealth that he didn't know anything about, you know. When he came, he took Indians as his slaves and treated them terribly, and so consequently he didn't prevail. And then 250 or 60 years later, others came, and the British actually, to some extent, was leaned too heavy on monetary gain when they came. And they wound up during the Spanish era, when the war was going on between the Choctaws and the Creek Indians. A lot of sterling silver showed up over in the Creek Nation. And that silver, sterling silver, was coming from the British government to Red Eagle Weatherford, who was using it to get Indians to scalp American settlers with. That's where the scare really came, when he, that's when the terrible tragedy at Fort Mims, that's what that was all about. Because Red Eagle, he skipped, hopped around and changed parties and shifted it. Finally wound up being pretty honorable in the long run. But when I was growing up, me and Mr. Pearson spent a lot of time in the river swamp, and I learned a good bit about it by being there, and I learned a good bit about the swamp by having a grandfather and a great-grandfather and 4 uncles who was on the river. And a few little short stories about things on the river that some of you know and some of you might not know, so I'll put them in there. Steamboat travel in the great Southwest, which was this area at that time, people didn't have any way to save money. They could make plenty to eat, plenty to wear, but they didn't have any way to save it. The food would perish in 1 year and they'd be right back where they were. And not until the advent of cotton came along and indigo could they pick the cotton, gin it, and send it to Mobile, put it in the warehouse and borrow money on it or sell it or whatever they wanted to do. That was the first stable markets they had that would benefit the people that lived in this area. And that's the reason so many blacks come from the riverbank back this way. If you look at that new senatorial district, you can see where the cotton pickers were. And that's actually the way it started. But little things up and down the river that you may not know that I've been told, or so I'm told, and I said a while ago, at Coffeeville, behind this old historic house right in Coffeeville, I saw, and I believe it's true, that there was a tunnel that went from that house down through red clay to the riverbank down below, which was rock. And it had rings fixed to the wall of that tunnel through there, where they shipped the slaves in, and for their safety and in order to keep them from getting away too, they would tie them to those rings on the wall of that tunnel that went up to that house. All right, on up to Alabama River, I was told a thing that was pretty much like this tabletop here, that was out in the river, and it had a walkway coming from the tabletop out to the bank, but the elevation of the water level had changed, and so you didn't see that. And this man said he served all during World War II in the Army, and told me if he ever lived to get home, he was gonna get him a diving suit and see if that was down there. So he went down, and there were steps going from the lower level up to the top level. Who knows what was up there? Because this was all under the water. And he said it was there. He said, you can take it from me, it's there. And that's at Yellow Bluff, right just out of McMillan and Blowdale. But coming on back down the river, this cotton prompted a need for transportation and, of course, for passengers and freight and food for survival and everything else. They relied on the boat, which my family was involved with. At that time, you had somewhere in the neighborhood of 200 steamboats home ported in Mobile, and you had about 50 boat landings in Washington and Clark County along this Tombigbee River here. And during the war, the Civil War, they made salt at the salt works across the river from Sunflower Hill for the Confederate Army, and they cut blocks of cement out of that lime quarry beside the road going down to across Salt Creek there to make foundations for the kettles that was sitting on those foundations, kind of like a syrup mill, but the fire went all the way down into several kettles and then up a chimney, which gave it a draft to cook the salt out. And the Dick Keys steamboat, about a 400-ton steamboat, was loading salt there, and it blew up, and it sank between Oven Bluff and the salt works there on Limestone Creek. And then around that, what we call Whistler Point, a tremendous steamboat called the St. Nicholas was snagged and sunk there. And one sank at Peavy's Landing, that was the Advance, I believe. But between the salt works and Oven Bluff now was a shipyard. It was called the Confederate States Navy Yard, and they made ships for the Confederate Army there. And they had 5 under construction that they burned, and about 2 that they set sail in and got it away from there. But on Oven Bluff now, there was a cannon foundation up on that bluff at Oven Bluff and also at Choctaw Bluff, aimed at the river at a certain place. And my uncle Simon Peter Gray told me that down there at a certain point in that river was a chain under the river with tremendous links in the chain. And they had the tops of small hardwood trees secured to that chain with the stumps still on those poles, and the stumps dragged on the bottom as the current pushed down. But you had a barricade underneath there. And when a northern ship would come through there, they would windish that chain up under that boat just at the right place and right time. When they got confused and didn't know what was going on, this cannon would blow them away. And the same thing happened at Choctaw Bluff also. Now that cannon is sitting at the City Hall in Jackson now. If you read that little plaque on that, of course you got to let your imagination roam around to put it all together and make it a story, you see. But these are the things that I know that happened there, and makes it very interesting to me. It's the reason I like to stay at home like I do, because I can always find something interesting to do and interesting to go see. But I was in office for 18 years, and I still live in the same house that I built when I was working at Silville. And my Aunt Fanny wanted me to move to Chatham, said, we've elected you now, you've got to move to Chatham if you're going to serve as probate judge. I said, I can't do it, Aunt Fanny. She said, why? I said, Lord have mercy, I got $2,800 invested in that house, and I just can't move off the lease. And that was a fact.
Oh,
You want to take a break on that, man?
What was your most difficult decision or situation you dealt with?
My most difficult part was the races that we have in the county, and they were being agitated from several different directions. Each faction of them was, when a little understanding would solve the whole problem, you know. One bunch was pretty high-tempered, and they couldn't control their tempers, and then a lot of folks got hurt because of that. But all in all, I think that, thank God, we were able to solve the most of it, and I think we're probably in as good a shape now as we've ever been in.
You were the judge when the schools were integrated in Washington County.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir. We had industry start moving in, and it was almost continuous. And at the time they started to moving in, a great percentage of the people in the county were old people. Old people that had been here and worked themselves to death during the Depression were in the old age bracket. Well, that was an extra burden on the county, but later on that faded away, and then we had the prominent force of labor in the county was construction workers, chiefly at McIntosh. There was no, when I was a child, there was no paved roads in the county. There was no school buses in the county. There was no Social Security. There was no welfare. There was no food stamp. Mr. Nash Johnson had a telephone that come from Franklin down to Leroy. Ms. Tampett was the telephone operator down there. She could hook your phone up to whoever you wanted to talk to, and she could make you a hamburger. Best one I ever tasted came from Ms. Tampett. But there were so many things we didn't have. We didn't have any pipelines, any gas lines. We didn't have any oil wells. We didn't have any roads. You went from Wayville over to Chatham on gravel road. And the little thing I was told, as I said a while ago, was that the government bought up cotton in order to give the farmer a little bit for his cotton. They didn't need the cotton. They wound up putting it under the road down there west of Bass's Creek, where Miss Edith Wilcox owned all that land, right in there just west of Bass's Creek. That's got a cotton base under the road there. You didn't know that, did you?
Somewhere around the county, some rosin, somewhere under the ground too. But
What were some things that you feel very proud of that you accomplished while you were in office?
Well, the things that I was most proud of, and I had to get people in other parts of the United States to help me get them because I had opposition to them locally, was something that would help a person that needed help. And health care has improved, hospitals improved, nursing homes improved, and health care. I was the chairman of the Health Planning Commission over 10 counties at one time, and then chairman of the health services in 4 counties in South Alabama, Mobile, Baldwin, and Escambia and Washington counties. And you have to muster up forces to get support for those kind of things. But I got some of the folks in Mobile County to vote for me. I had to get some rooms for the hospital in Monroe. I had to get a health clinic in Suffolk County. And Thomas Hospital wanted 82-bed addition in Baldwin County, but couldn't get it because Mobile was bought. And they used my political knowledge, whatever you want to call it, in order to muster up enough votes to get those things done, even though Mobile was against it, and I did that. And those kind of things is where I feel like I really helped.
We have any questions from anyone?
maybe Hattie would like to say a few words. And Sally.
My
Tell who your father was.
Yeah, my father was David Q. Turner, and My mother was known as Hunter Gray, named after the hunters in Prestwick. And if I ever do amount to anything, I'm gonna give my mother full credit for it because I think she was as near perfect as anybody I ever saw. And I was naming my folks a while ago. I forgot my brother Sam, who died years ago with cancer.
74.
My father was Monroe Cornell and he was married to Nora Howard. They had 11 children and I was one of the middle children. And he was good-natured, he worked hard, he didn't have an education. He could write his name, but that was it. And he is known by everybody that speaks of him now as feeding more people than any one man that they knew of.
And where were you raised?
And I was raised right here at Sunflower. I was born at Hawthorne, and when I was 4 years old, we moved to Sunflower. And but during the Depression, a lot of people were hungry, and they would come to our house. Even though we had a big family, we might have wall-to-wall children, but they all went home with a full stomach. They never were hungry. And I know when I was small, remember my mother making 48 biscuits for breakfast. It was just that many people to feed, plus the boys and Daddy had to go to work for the lunch, and she would make enough to go with it. Yeah, that was something.
Where'd you go to school?
I went to school at Sunflower, and then I went to Wedderville, and then I went on to Leroy.
I was a pretty good athlete back in my day. I made the all-county baseball team and played football. I was kind of frail. I served 2 years as a water boy. Vivian Junior Johnson had that before I got it, and I wouldn't rest until I got to be the water boy. And they done me so bad playing football, I finally decided I could do better, so I just quit and married a cheerleader.
You were a cheerleader?
Yeah.
Married the cheerleader.
What years were you a cheerleader?
I was a cheerleader in 1947 and 48. Long time ago. I also played basketball.
Wayne,
They did away with basketball my senior year, but I did play in my sophomore and junior year.
Wayne was talking about saying something funny. If I told all I knew, I could probably generate enough confusion to start the Third World War if I told all I knew, because I had the evidence, in court. But I've had my life threatened, and I didn't like that. Had a woman stick a gun in my face, and I could see the bullets down the barrel, and I didn't like that. But I'm still here, thank goodness. But it's to hold one of those jobs, there's more to it than just the fascinating part of it. I can vouch for that, and I think Mr. Fiddle can too.
And we're in the home of Miss Sally in
Stanley.
Stanley, excuse me. And tell us something about your connection here.
Well, I like to call myself the matriarch. I'm the oldest girl in the family. And I'm 13 years older than my brother Tom, 2 years older than my brother Sam, whom we lost in '74.
Do you mind telling us how old?
How old I am? I was born March the 9th, 1914. My father used to tease me, say I set off World War I. Came into the world squalling and hollering. But when I was old enough to go to school, well, I'll back up a little bit. I was born in Prestwick, Alabama. And that was when Hunter Bend Lumber Company had the big sawmill down there, and there was a big colony of black people, and they were all so good to us. There were two white families, the Hunter family and my father and mother. That's where I was born in 1914. But when I was about a year old, my father decided to go back to St. Stephen's, where he was also in mercantile business. We stayed there a few months, and he had an opportunity to buy this place here. In the meantime, he had had a bad accident, and his doctor told him, you need to get out of the store and get out in the fresh air. So he thought he would farm. He wasn't a farmer. He was a good merchant, but he bought this place in 1916. And to give you a little history of the house, this house was built in 1871. All of the lumber, all the materials in this house had been cut off of this land belonging to Dr. Williams, South Carolina native, who owned a lot of land in this area. And he was planning a much larger, more elaborate, elegant house than he wound up with. It was planned to be the typical Neo-Grecian style that was popular in the South in those days. But the war interfered with his plans, and he didn't have enough material to finish the two-story house, so this is what he built. But it has stood many storms and a lot of living, and it's still as sound as can be. We had to move it when they four-laned the highway. We moved it, it was moved back 100 feet. And I must mention the name of the man that owned the company that moved it, Mr. Fowler in Mobile. He has since died of heart trouble. And I tell people, Mr. Fowler moved this house so carefully and put it on such a good foundation and made it, I feel, so safe that some glasses that were left in the kitchen on the drain board of the sink, I had left there for the working men to have some water that was still running when they were first started the job. Not one of those glasses turned over or got broken, and he did not break a window pane in the house. And it was moved 100 feet intact. He didn't have to take it apart. He just rolled it back.
What year was that?
That was 89, wasn't it?
Yeah.
89. No, let's see, 80.
No, it was about 89, so.
I think we moved back in the house in March of 89. And it had taken him some time to get it moved because in the meantime we had a hurricane in the Gulf, and he slowed down his work for a while in there, but it was all wound up and finished in 89.
Did you have to move the furniture? You moved
Oh
it?
yes, moved everything out of the house and put it in storage. And you know what happens to your furniture when you leave it in storage a long time, but that's another story.
This,
About what's about the floor joists or whatever it is under the house, tell them about
I
that.
know you're interested in lumber.
Well, you
timber.
showed it to me one time, I thought your brother would be
The
interested.
seals under this house were hewed out. There's one that goes from right over there back to the back of the kitchen. It's 60-something foot long, and it's about that square. The floor joists were all hewed out also. They're various width, but they're about 3 inches thick and about 10, 11, 12 inches. Some of them had to be dapped out to make them set on the steel beams, but they were put together with pegs under that. The studs in the wall are rough 3x5s about with a tongue on the end of them. And those tongues are secured down in a groove, cut in those big seals around the walls where the wall hit over the seal, they'll hook together. But these boards are dressed on the inside, and they're rough on the back side, And those boards are about that thick. You see one of them, just a little small piece of one was very, very heavy. All these years it's dried out. And those window sashes, not all of them, there's a few been replaced, but the most of them in here has been here since 1871. That's a wooden window sash. It's been in those windows since 1871.
And they are cypress, not as heavy as the new ones, the pine.
But that's, I think that's remarkable. And the house is just as good as it ever was. Actually, you know.
That's where you got all these wardrobes around.
I think we've got 68 wardrobes.
I think we got 8 wardrobes, 3 dining room sets, 50-something chairs,
3 pianos.
3 pianos, had 4, she gave 1 away. The girl come along and said, "Miss Dad, you said you give me that piano if I better not pay it." She said, "I told you that." She said, "You did." She said, "Well, take the grand piano, leave like grand piano."
And away she went. We had 65 chairs in the house at one time. We
Just
had,
like these, like these.
They are
yes,
just little
yes.
remnants of different people's household that give the furniture to my
They're all
mother.
our
and
family.
Sally.
Our family pieces,
Wait,
different
that's a
generations.
picture of our 50th wedding anniversary that was made in May 1999.
May of '99.
We had piano players here that day. Was you here, Miss Edith, that day?
I heard you heard that.
Laura and
I think they
Dale.
got to come.
Laura and Dale from St. Stephen up Jack's daughter.
Listen, I would like to tell how we saved this house probably from destruction when the highway was wide. Some 40 years ago when I was county superintendent, I had a letter from the highway department saying that they were going to widen the highway in the Sunflower area and sent me a little map of what they were going to do. It asked me were there any historic structures on the proposed right-of-way. Well, I wrote them back, yes, it was a very historic home on the proposed right-of-way, the Dr. Washington Williams house and office. And then they, in the form they sent, they asked me, what was it? Architecture. Well, I didn't know much about what architecture was, so I put in that with it was a combination of old plantation and French Creole.
Pretty close.
And you know, when they widened the highway, they had to move the house back and have it done just like Sally said. It didn't cost you anything, did it?
Cost that.
If it hadn't been for that letter, they could have had her move it at her expense, or they would have torn it down and got it out of the way.
We give excuse me,
I wonder how close it is to the river back here.
I always heard about
6.5 miles.
how much it?
Straight through about 6.5 miles.
You had mentioned the steamboat business. So was there a boat named the Natchez that you're aware of?
There was,
I have a
but back to
picture.
this river, Miss Edith, when the river's up, it comes, the back of our place is a mile back there. And it comes within less than a quarter of a mile to the back of our place when the river's up. And incidentally, that's one thing that I told them at the meeting in Pickinsville when they had a big blowout up there, was that I came from the part of the Tombigbee River where it was the widest part. And that being down at Tornette from the Grimes place on the Harold's place west of the 43 to Oven Bluff. You can get in the outboard motor to Grimes place and go to Oven Bluff when the river's up. It's 7 miles wide. And that is actually on record as being the widest place on the Tombigbee River. And me and Theodore and all his boys have spent a many great day down there hunting and fishing. Had we?
Yeah.
Hunting and fishing in
Does
the
anyone have any other questions? Should introduce yourself.
My name's David Turner. I'm Tom and Addie Turner's son. I'm a safety manager that more or less freelance to different companies. One of my favorite jobs I ever had though was up in Fort Bragg where I was working with Cadell at the post up there. Won a few awards up there while I was up there. So. But I'm back home now, so I'm just going to venture out on short shutdowns and come back to the house where I feel I'm needed most.
You're named for your grandfather.
And I'm named after David Q. Turner the first.
Cadell sent him to Georgia Tech. Thought that was pretty good, they must have thought something of it.